what progressively happens, the others in the gang see that this life isn't really a life worth living, and then the pressure for them to change it. Then you have all the agencies moving them out, offering them a way out, offering them help and support.
Okay.
That's absolutely critical.
Ian Duncan-Smith, thank you very much, the Work and Pension Secretary. Let's talk to Twilight Bey now, who grew up in LA and helped broker a deal between two of the most notorious gangs there, the Crips and the Bloods, back in the early 1990s. Morning, Twilight.
Good morning.
Just going back to the point Ian Duncan-Smith was making there, and Chris was asking as well about how proactive you can be in terms of tackling the activities of gangs. Do you think that he's got the right approach?
I think the Boston model in Boston may have worked in some context. However, I think there are better models of what can bring about longer lasting change. When you look at the Boston model, it's more law enforcement led. And because it's more law enforcement led, more of the resources and investment into it is used at the top end of basically paying for police officers. Whereas as Ian Duncan-Smith himself said, and what I've seen from working in this field for over 20 years and working in London and successfully running a community-based intervention scheme called Pathways to Progress Catalyst Housing Group, what we've found is that when you provide education and you have an economic policy program that's built in to also address other conditions that have brought about gang activity in the first place, that's what gives you the greatest potential for long-term change. So the investment shouldn't be heavy-ended at the law enforcement end, because we know that police officers and what they do is more of a reactionary force to crime. And what this actually calls for is proactive, interactive intervention at the grassroots level.
Let me just ask you then, when the Prime Minister is referring to a moral collapse in our society, do you think that that's true, that that's something reflected among the young people who were involved in the rioting last week? And if so, how do you address that?
I believe that there are a lot of things that Britain, as citizenry, leadership, those in the schools. I mean, if a child is in school for 14,500 hours and can't pass a GCSE, that says something about the school system. If parents have to scramble around and go through a complicated process of trying to get their children into a decent school, that also says a lot about the policy and the structure. And when you have young people able to see and recognize when there's wrongdoing done among those who are in the positions of power, then yes, they're going to notice that, because we live in a media-based world, and as we've learned over the last few weeks, and you know, many people who work with young people already know that they're quite savvy at getting access to information and being aware of what's going on. And those that do pay attention and those who have kind of a handle on how society is operating outside of the impact of pop culture, they see those things and they question why is it that they can do these things, but when we do things, they come down so heavy-handed on us. I think that, you know, when we talk about gangs in the UK, I think we have to be clear that the UK gangs are not exactly like gangs in Los Angeles. The UK gangs have a different social structure and socioeconomic structure around them that gangs in Los Angeles do not have. For instance, even though the government is planning to take it away, access to EMA. You know, kids in Los Angeles wouldn't have access to anything like EMA.
Are you saying the kids here are actually better off then?
I'm saying that children here that want the opportunity to do something and understand how to access those kinds of things have some level of support, and they can go about and access these things. So when people ask me, does Britain have a gang problem? I say, well, according to Simon Halsworth's definition of gangs, which is used by the Metropolitan Police Authority, I see that you have badly behaved peer groups who are not very organized, very transient groups of young people who move in between different groups. I don't see this organized street gang.
That's very interesting.
Element that the government keeps talking about. And I'm out there on the front line working with these young people all the time.
Yeah, okay, no, that's a very interesting perspective. Thank you very much, Twilight Bey, who grew up in LA, worked with gangs there. The time is 7:18.